Parents didn't invite E to their housewarming party, even though their new house belongs to me. I came uninvited and heard, well, what's done is done. You bought it, but it's ours now. So I gave them a little surprise. My name is Madison and I came into this world as an afterthought, born to parents who were already in their 40s and had a 10-year-old daughter they considered more than enough. We didn't plan for you, my mother would often say, not maliciously but matter-of-factly, as if stating the weather. If it wasn't for your grandparents' insistence, she'd trail off, leaving the rest unsaid, but the message was clear. I was here because my maternal grandparents had convinced my reluctant parents to have another child. They were overjoyed at the prospect of a second granddaughter, while my parents viewed me as an obligation they hadn't asked for. My sister Sarah was already deep into her own world of teenage concerns when I arrived. She wasn't cruel or mean, she simply acted as if I didn't exist. While I played with my dolls in the corner of our shared living room, she'd be sprawled on the couch, talking on the phone about boys and college applications, completely oblivious to my presence. "Sarah, honey, don't forget your SAT prep books," Mom would say, carefully arranging them in her backpack. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for someone to notice I needed help with my homework. But help rarely came from my parents. Instead, they developed a routine that shaped my entire childhood. Every morning they'd drop me off at my grandparents' house. "You wanted her?" my father would say to my grandfather, keys jingling in his hand as he prepared to leave for work. "She's all yours." My grandparents' house became my real home. They picked me up from school, helped me with my homework, took me to the park and made sure I was fed and cared for. Only late at night would my parents come to collect me, usually looking tired and slightly annoyed at having to make the trip. "Madison," my grandmother would say, hugging me goodbye each night, "you're the best thing that ever happened to us." And in those moments wrapped in her warm embrace, I could almost forget that I wasn't wanted elsewhere. This pattern continued day after day, year after year. While my sister prepared for her bright future, I learned to navigate life as an afterthought in my own home. But my grandparents' love was constant, unwavering, and it was in their home that I learned what it meant to be truly valued. One day my grandfather would tell me as we worked on my math homework, "You'll understand that sometimes the best things in life aren't planned." He'd wink at me, and for a moment, the weight of being unwanted would lift from my small shoulders. With Sarah away at college, I thought things might change at home. Maybe my parents would finally see me, the daughter who remained. I couldn't have been more wrong. "Madison," my mother's voice reached me before I could even drop my backpack after school. "The house needs cleaning. Start with the bathrooms." What had once been Sarah's chores now became mine, along with a host of new responsibilities. The washing machine became my constant companion, and I learned all its quirks and settings by heart. The housework seemed endless. "You live here, you need to contribute," my father would say whenever I showed the slightest hesitation. "Your sister always did her part." By the time I was 14, I had graduated from cleaning to cooking. It wasn't a gradual transition. One day my mother simply stopped making dinner. "You're old enough now," she announced one morning. "We expect dinner ready when we get home from work." That first night I made spaghetti. It was slightly overcooked but edible. My parents ate in silence. Then my father looked up from his plate. "Tomorrow try something with chicken," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. My only escape was dreaming about college. Every night, after finishing the dishes, I'd retreat to my room and browse university websites. I'd imagine myself walking across different campuses, far away from the endless chores and cold silences. Then, when I was 16, Sarah came home with news that changed everything. She bounced through the front door one Sunday afternoon, dragging a tall, well-dressed man behind her. "Mom, Dad," she squealed. "This is James, we're engaged." You'd think someone had just announced they'd won the lottery. My parents literally jumped from their seats, my mother crying tears of joy. My father was already pulling out his phone to call relatives. "We'll pay for everything," my mother declared, hugging Sarah. "Our first daughter's wedding has to be perfect." The wedding preparations consumed our house for months. Every conversation revolved around flowers, venues, and guest lists. Money seemed to flow like water: designer dress, premium vendors, top-tier everything. My grandparents attended the wedding but seemed uncomfortable with the extravagance. I caught my grandmother frowning at the ice sculpture that probably cost more than a semester of college tuition. Grandfather just shook his head at the champagne fountain, but they kept their thoughts to themselves. 2 years later, I sat at our dinner table, 3 college acceptance letters spread before me. After years of playing Cinderella while maintaining straight A's, I'd been accepted to all my top choices. My heart raced as I told my parents the good news. "That's nice," my mother said, not looking up from her plate. "But we can't pay for it. We spent all our savings on your sister's wedding, even took out a loan for it. There's nothing left for college." "But you paid for Sarah's college," I stammered. "That was different," my mother replied. "We saw potential in her." The silence at the dinner table was deafening after my mother's words about potential. I sat there, acceptance letters suddenly feeling heavy in my hands, as my parents continued eating as if they hadn't just shattered my dreams. "You should get a job," my father said between bites. "Save up some money. Take out a student loan. That's what responsible adults do." I left the table without being excused, something I'd never dared to do before. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and called my grandmother. Within minutes I was walking through their familiar front door, tears streaming down my face. "Oh, sweetheart." My grandmother pulled me into a hug while I told them everything between sobs. My grandfather's face grew stern as he listened, but there was a glimmer in his eyes that I couldn't quite read. When I finished, they exchanged a knowing look. "Madison," my grandfather said, taking my hand, "we've been expecting something like this." "What do you mean?" "We've watched how they've treated you all these years." My grandmother explained. "How they spent money on Sarah's education, her wedding. We knew they might do this to you." My grandfather stood up and walked to his study. When he returned, he was holding a folder. "We've been saving for your education since the day you were born," he said, opening the folder to reveal bank statements. "You can choose any of those 3 colleges. We've got you covered." That night, I went home and packed my things. Not everything, just what I needed. My parents were watching TV downstairs and barely looked up when I told them I was moving in with my grandparents. "Whatever you think is best," my mother said, her eyes never leaving the screen. Was that relief I heard in her voice? The next few weeks were a blur of college preparations. I chose to study financial analysis. Somehow, watching my parents' mismanagement of money had sparked an interest in doing things the right way. My grandparents helped me with every detail, from filling out forms to buying supplies. When I finally started classes that fall, it felt like stepping into a new world. The material was challenging, but I loved every minute of it. Each class felt like a step away from my old life and toward something better. My professors noticed my enthusiasm, and soon I was staying after class to discuss complex financial concepts. For the first time in my life, someone besides my grandparents saw potential in me, real potential. My second year of college was in full swing when my grandmother called with some interesting news about Sarah. "Your sister's having trouble," she said during one of our weekly calls. "Her marketing career isn't taking off like she hoped, and James can't seem to hold down a job. They're constantly asking your parents for money." I wasn't surprised when she told me they were getting it. "Your mother emptied her retirement account last month to help them with rent," my grandmother sighed. "They just can't say no to her." A year later, the situation got worse. Sarah and James couldn't make rent anymore, even with our parents' help. They moved back into my old bedroom, the one I'd spent years keeping spotlessly clean. The irony wasn't lost on me. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My professors had helped me land internships at prestigious financial firms, where I discovered I had a real talent for solving complex financial puzzles. Each challenging project made me more certain I'd chosen the right path. "You've got a natural instinct for this," my supervisor at Morgan Stanley told me during my performance review. "We'd love to have you back next summer." I kept my head down and focused on my studies, barely thinking about my family, except during calls with my grandparents. But when I visited them during my senior year, I knew something was wrong the moment I walked through their door. My grandmother's usual warm smile seemed forced, and my grandfather, usually quick with a joke, sat quietly in his armchair. The house felt heavy with unspoken words. "What's wrong?" I asked over dinner, watching them push food around their plates. "And don't tell me it's nothing. I know you both too well." They exchanged a look I'd seen too many times before, the one that meant they were trying to protect me from something. Finally, my grandfather spoke. "Your parents came to see us last week," he said, his voice unusually tired. "They wanted their inheritance early." "What do you mean?" I put down my fork. "They're in trouble with the banks," my grandmother explained. "Multiple loans, credit card debt. They said they needed $200,000 to avoid bankruptcy. And you gave it to them?" I couldn't keep the anger from my voice. My grandfather nodded. "We had to, Madison. They're still our daughter and son-in-law despite everything. It was most of our savings, but most of your savings." I was furious. After everything they've done? After how they keep enabling Sarah's irresponsible behavior? After how they treated me? "Sweetheart," my grandmother reached across the table to take my hand. "We know you're angry, but what's done is done. We'll be fine." But I kept getting angry. My parents, who'd never had money for my education, who'd treated me like a servant, had the audacity to demand money from the only people who'd ever truly cared for me. All because they couldn't say no to Sarah and couldn't manage their own finances. My hard work paid off after graduation. With glowing recommendations from my professors and impressive internship experiences, I landed a position at one of the top financial firms in the city. The starting salary was more than I'd ever dreamed of making. I found a modest one-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy but clean and safe. Every morning I'd wake up grateful that I didn't have to cook breakfast for anyone but myself. My career flourished as I threw myself into each new challenge, earning promotions and bonuses that my younger self couldn't have imagined. Within a few years, I had enough saved for a down payment on my own place. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I couldn't help but think of my parents and Sarah, who'd never managed their money well enough to buy property. Not that they knew about my success, we hadn't spoken in years. Then came the call that changed everything. My grandfather had suffered a massive heart attack. By the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. My grandmother, who'd been by his side for over 50 years, seemed to lose her spark after that. Less than 2 months later, she followed him. I was arranging my grandmother's funeral when I heard a familiar voice behind me at the funeral home. "Madison, do you want some help with the arrangements?" I turned to find my mother standing there, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, but something in her expression made me hesitate. "Sure," I heard myself say. "That would be nice." Over the next few days as we planned the service, my parents began to open up. They were struggling, they admitted. Retirement hadn't been kind to them financially. "We barely make ends meet," my father confessed one afternoon while we were picking out flowers. "And with Sarah's twins." "Twins?" This was news to me. Yes, 4-year-olds. My mother jumped in. Such beautiful boys, but they need so much. Sarah and James still can't manage on their own, so we help where we can. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Some things never changed. A week after we laid my grandmother to rest, we gathered in a wood-paneled office for the reading of the will. I sat across from my parents with Sarah and James slouched in chairs beside them. The room smelled of old papers and furniture polish, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The notary, Mr. Patterson, adjusted his glasses and began reading in a monotone voice. I expected the usual legal jargon, but what came next made everyone sit up straight. To our beloved granddaughter Madison, he read, "We leave our house at 1542 Maple Street, and the sum of $150,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's mouth fell open, and my mother gripped my father's arm so hard her knuckles turned white. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and continued, and a personal note from Mr. Henderson to his daughter Margaret. He looked at my mother. The note reads, "Margaret, remember that we gave you $200,000 when you needed it most. This is our final decision, and we trust you will respect it as we respected your needs then." My mother's face flushed red, then pale. My father stared at the floor, while Sarah and James exchanged worried glances. After the notary finished and gathered his papers, my parents approached me in the parking lot. The confident demeanor they'd shown during the funeral arrangements was gone, replaced by something almost desperate. "Madison, honey," my mother began, her voice trembling. "You have to understand, we always thought we'd inherit the house. We were counting on it. We're struggling," my father added, running his hand through his gray hair. "The mortgage, Sarah's family's expenses, we could really use the house." I looked at them both, remembering all the years of neglect, the constant reminders that I wasn't wanted, the refusal to help with my education. "No," I said firmly. "The house is mine. That's what Grandma and Grandpa wanted." They continued pleading, following me to my car, but I stood firm. Sarah joined in too, talking about how her boys needed a yard to play in, but I simply got in my car and drove away. A week later, my phone rang. It was my mother, asking me to come over for dinner. Something in her voice sounded different, humbled perhaps. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Pulling up to my childhood home was like stepping back in time, except everything looked shabbier than I remembered. The paint was peeling, the gutters sagged, and the once pristine lawn was patchy and overgrown. Inside, the house was crowded but clean. Sarah's twins, Tommy and Jake, ran circles around the living room while James half-heartedly told them to settle down. The boys were cute. They had Sarah's eyes and James's curly hair. "Madison," my mother smiled, pulling me into an awkward hug. "We made your favorite pot roast." "That's not my favorite," I said automatically. "That's Sarah's favorite." An uncomfortable silence followed, broken by my father clearing his throat. "Well, why don't you tell us what your favorite food is? We'd love to know." And surprisingly, they seemed genuinely interested. Over dinner, they asked about my job, my apartment, my hobbies. They actually listened when I talked about my work in finance, though I could tell most of it went over their heads. That dinner led to another, then another. Soon, I was joining them for holidays, bringing gifts for the twins, even helping Sarah with their homework sometimes. When they mentioned the house needed repairs, I found myself offering to help. I paid for a new roof, fixed the heating system, repainted the exterior. Each time I wrote a check, my parents would tear up with gratitude. "You're too good to us," my mother would say, hugging me. "We don't deserve this." "You're right," I would think, but never say it aloud, because despite everything, despite all the years of hurt and neglect, some small part of me still wanted to believe people could change. The years passed and my career continued to flourish. Each promotion brought new opportunities, and my investment portfolio grew substantially. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents seemed to strengthen. They were getting older, both were over 70 now, and I found myself wanting to do something meaningful for them. "I've been thinking," I said during one of our Sunday dinners, watching my father struggle up from his chair. "This house isn't really suitable for you anymore. I want to buy you a new house. Something single-story with a nice garden but easier to maintain. Something that would be comfortable for your retirement years." Their reactions surprised me, actual tears of joy. We spent the next few weeks house hunting together, and finally found the perfect place. A beautiful ranch-style home in a quiet neighborhood, with wide doorways and no stairs. After closing my checkbook, my parents couldn't stop talking about how excited they were. "We need to have a proper housewarming party," my father declared. "Let us arrange everything. It's the least we can do." "That would be lovely," I agreed, planning to present them with the deed during the celebration. "Just let me know when." Weeks passed. I was busy with work, but I kept expecting an invitation. When nothing came, I started asking about the date. "Oh, we're still planning," my mother would say. "You know how these things take time." "We want it to be perfect," my father would add. "We'll let you know soon." Something about their vague responses niggled at me. One evening, after another deflecting phone call from my mother, I found myself typing Sarah's name into Facebook. I hadn't looked at her profile in years. We weren't connected on any social media. There it was posted just hours ago. "So excited for Mom and Dad's housewarming party this Saturday. The new house is gorgeous. Can't wait to celebrate with everyone." The post had dozens of comments from relatives and friends, all confirming their attendance. Photos showed decorations being set up, caterers being booked. This wasn't a last-minute gathering. This had been planned for weeks. My hands shaking slightly, I called my mother. "Hi, Mom." I kept my voice casual. Just checking in about the housewarming party. Have you set a date yet? Oh honey, not yet, she replied smoothly. Probably in a couple of weeks. We're still working out the details. We want everyone to be able to come. Everyone except me, apparently. That Saturday I parked my car a block away from the house I bought. Music and laughter drifted through the evening air. Through the large front windows I could see dozens of people milling about, relatives I recognized, friends of my parents, Sarah's social circle. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. They were expecting everyone except the person who actually owned the house. I slipped in quietly, following the sound of my father's voice to the living room. And after all these years of hard work, we finally did it. He was saying to a group of attentive listeners, bought our dream home. Don't forget about Sarah, my mother added proudly. She helped so much with the down payment. Such a wonderful daughter, always taking care of her parents, someone commented. Unlike some people, my mother said pointedly, you know, our younger daughter hasn't helped us at all. Probably too busy with her career to care about family. I stood in the doorway, heat rising to my face as I watched this performance. Sarah beamed beside them, her 7-year-old twins running between the guests in the house I bought. Actually, I said loudly, making everyone jump, I think you've got that backwards. The color drained from my parents' faces. Guests turned to stare at me, whispers rippling through the crowd. Madison, my father recovered first, his smile tight. What a surprise. I'm sure it is, I replied, stepping into the room, especially since you forgot to invite me to the housewarming party for the house I bought. Dead silence fell over the room. Sarah's husband suddenly became very interested in his shoes. Well, my mother's voice had an edge to it. What's done is done. You bought it, yes, but it's ours now. You can't expect eternal gratitude. That's right, my father added, gaining confidence. And frankly, you're not welcome here. This is a family gathering, and Sarah and her family will be living here too, my mother announced. They've already sold their house. It's all arranged. I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, harsh sound that made several guests step back. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out a folder. You seem to be confused about something, I said, opening the folder to reveal the deed and ownership papers. This house belongs to me. I never signed it over to you. I was planning to give it to you tonight at what I thought would be a proper housewarming party. My mother's face went from pale to ashen. My father started to sputter. And now, I turned to address the stunned guests. Now, I'd like everyone to leave. This is my house, and the party's over. You can't do this. My mother's voice rose to a shriek. We're your parents. No, I said quietly. You're just the people who gave birth to me. My real parents, my grandparents, taught me that family means more than blood. They also taught me about finances, which is why I own this house and you don't. They left in tears, my parents, Sarah, James, the twins, and all their guests. I watched from the front porch as they drove away, one by one, until the street was empty. After a few weeks I learned they'd used the money from selling their own house to buy an apartment. Sarah, James, and the twins moved in with them. They tried calling me for weeks, but I blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media accounts. The house? I sold it a month later and put the money in my account. Someday I'll have my own children, and I promise myself they'll never have to earn my love or compete for my attention. Unlike my parents, I'll love my children equally and unconditionally, the way my grandparents loved me.